With solid drafting, poor offseason asset management, and no playoff appearances to show for it, the Steve Yzerman reign in Detroit has been fairly controversial among fans. But will a quieter offseason and a new starting goalie prove to be the mix that finally gets the Red Wings back into the playoffs? This is the 2025-26 deep dive on the Detroit Red Wings. Hello and welcome back to my offseason deep dive series. This is team number 20, the Detroit Red Wings. And Detroit's an interesting team. I've been pretty low on the Red Wings pretty much this entire time that Steve Yzerman's been there. And Wings fans haven't liked me for that. But as of now, they have yet to make the playoffs, and it looks like another year where they might be the odd team out. Now, I think that they're closer this year than they have been in the past. And, I mean, obviously the 20th ranking here proves that. I mean, top 16 theoretically are the teams that, as of right now, I see, if the playoffs started today, would be my teams to make the playoffs. I get that nothing's happened yet, so that doesn't make sense. But in terms of power rankings, right, like it's as I see these teams at this moment, right, is how they're formatted. So 20th is pretty close to that bubble playoff spot, and I do think that they'll be, one of the bubble teams in the East. And it's just it's been an interesting road to get to this team, because this team is kind of a mess, right? Like the blue line, I think Red Wings fans can agree that the blue line, aside from two defensemen on it, is a absolute disaster. And even then, I mean, Simon Edvinsson still hasn't really proved much. He's looked good based on what he should be at this point, but he hasn't exceeded expectations yet. And Mort Seider, I think, gets. I think it's weird because I think a lot of the non-Red Wings fans kind of underrate what Mort Seider is, and a lot of Red Wings fans completely overrate what Mort Seider is. So he's kind of a strange defenseman in that sense. And then the rest of the blue line is just kind of a total mess. Obviously, they go get John Gibson, which is the big addition. Everybody thought he was going to go to Edmonton, so him going to Detroit was kind of a surprise. But they got him, and we'll see how that works out. He's been a little hit or miss the last couple of years after being one of the best, if not the best, goalie in the NHL for the early part of the 2010s. Early to late part of the 2010s, I guess. More the late part, yeah. You know what I mean. And you have an offense that is, decent. There's definitely some interesting pieces on the offense. I definitely think the top, four forwards on this team are pretty solid. And then, the team starts to kind of drop off after that. And then, you get to the bottom of the lineup, and I think the bottom of the lineup is pretty good too. So it's really the heart of this lineup, the middle of the lineup is really where this team struggles in terms of their offense, and we're going to kind of dive into that too. But there's a lot of issues still on this Red Wings team, and if you look at some of the teams that are at the top of the league, those really aren't issues that they have, right? We were never the issues that are problems in Detroit are the strengths of some of the best teams in the league, right? We talk about teams like Florida and Tampa Bay's depth all the time. We talk about Colorado when they won the Cup having a elite middle six and a super deep defensive core. And those are things the Red Wings don't have, and they're not things that the Red Wings are projected to have, right? There's nobody coming in this year that's going to fix the bottom four defensemen and the middle six forwards on this team, right? It's very unlikely they're going to be able to solve both those problems. And it's true that you can get to the playoffs, without those things, but that really shouldn't be the goal at this point, right? You're trying to compete for a Stanley Cup, and it's tough to just be sad. Obviously, making the playoffs at this point seems like a requirement, right? And I think the comparison that's been thrown around a lot is to Montreal, and Montreal wasn't even supposed to be close to a playoff spot last year, and they got in. So in that case, it was a successful season for them. At this point, if the Red Wings miss the playoffs this year, how much longer is the leash on Steve Yzerman, who hasn't had a crazy elite track record so far in Detroit anyway? He's had a lot of very controversial moves. Very few of them have worked out in his favor. So, you look back, the Ben Sherratt contract was bad. The Justin Hull acquisition was bad. The JT Compher move was bad. The Andrew Copp move was bad. Patrick Kane's been okay for what he is. But you look around here and you're saying, okay, the drafting's been fine, right? But Raymond and Sider, have they, are they going to take another big step forward? We'll see. And then like everything else is just kind of okay. So a lot of his reputation is being hung on what he did in Tampa Bay. And unfortunately, this has kind of been the example of the credit for building a great team shouldn't just go to the one person who gets, who's interviewed after every move. It should go to the staff that's in place and the scouts. And it's a really good example of the fact that like a GM isn't the one doing all the scouting and all the analyzing. He's just getting the information from his scouts and then making informed decisions based on that information, right? Like now that's not always the case, right? Obviously GMs will scout players and do that, but like that's not their primary job, right? And I feel like this is a good example of that, and it's a good learning lesson for NHL fans who might not know that, because like the scouting staff and the development staff in Tampa Bay did a lot of that early legwork that got to where they were. And now obviously Steve Yzerman was part of that. I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve any credit for that at all, but the point is that like the staff around you are just as much a reason of why you're great at or not good at your job as you are. And in a lot of cases you can either get propped up or sabotaged by that. And this is, I think, an example of that, where Steve Yzerman might have been, a middle of the pack GM that was elevated by one of the best scouting departments in the NHL. And based on, the fact that Tampa Bay is still really good and they're still drafting pretty solidly despite not having any picks. And for the most part, their moves have been, productive aside from the Tanner Jeannot trade, which was, a fairly big negative. But they're still, a really productive roster. Kind of shows that that department's still doing pretty good. But I digress. That's just a little bit there. I'm sure Red Wing fans are already attacking me in the comments, so that's great. But boost the engagement, please. I'm all for it. We look at their numbers. They're 20th in offense, and for a lot of the reasons why I said, I think the top end of the roster is pretty solid, like in terms of like their top three forwards. And their bottom three forwards are pretty good too. It's just kind of the middle that worries me there, and that's what gets them to 20th. The defense is 30th for very much the same reasons. Four of their defensemen are borderline unplayable in the roles that they'll be given. And, Simon Evans is going to be asked to do a lot more than he probably should be at this point. Goaltending is 18th, and again, like they went out and got John Gibson, who has been inconsistent, to say the least, in his last couple years in Anaheim. A lot of people chalk that up to the team not being good, but that's not really how goal saved above expected works, but whatever, it's fine. We'll see. Well, I don't think that the blue line in Detroit is going to do him any favors compared to what he had in Anaheim, but if you think him playing in front of Justin Holl and Ben Sherrod is going to be any better than it was with guys like Cam Fowler and Brandon and Josh Manson, then hey, I mean, I'm all for it, I guess. Special teams, they're 24th, and it's like just an okay special teams unit. And the coaching culture is 26th, again, because they have a head coach that I'm not in love with, and they have a GM who I don't really trust at this point to get this team out of the mess that he's partially responsible for creating. But let's jump into the coaching culture here, and let's start with Steve Yzerman, who I've already kind of covered here, and obviously he gets a lot of it seems like the Tampa Bay shine has kind of worn off. We're talking about that being 6 years ago now. It's time to kind of to move on from that, right? Hockey is such a fast sport. It's such a ever-changing landscape. It's really hard to hang praise on a person currently for something they did 6 years ago, or even less than that, right? Because the team itself is built before that. And although I do think that he deserves credit for what the Tampa Bay Lightning became, you look at the body of work here in Detroit, and a lot of now, granted, the team that he got when he stepped in wasn't very good, but he hasn't really done anything to elevate that, right? Like, since he stepped into this roster, like, how much better are they really from when he left, right? Like, they have a bunch of, bloated contracts that, granted, aren't super long, and some of them are expiring in the next year or two, but none of those moves really helped elevate the roster, right? Like in the way that they expected them to. And again, like you look at the draft picks, right? Like I like Lucas Raymond, I really like Mort Sider, but like are they going to be able to take a step forward and move up into is Sider going to become a top 10 defenseman in the NHL? And Red Wings fans might already think he's there. I disagree. And is Lucas Raymond gonna move up into that tier of player? And not saying that they have to, but at this point, like those are your core pieces, right? So if you really want to be competitive, like there's not, there's interesting things kind of around that, and then you have the goaltending situation, right? Obviously, like Sebastian Cossa, it doesn't seem like that is going to be a thing. But Trey Augustine looks really good, so like they kind of lucked into that. So it's interesting because there's not really like a on the roster move aside from the two, 3 draft picks that I look at. I'm like, yeah, that was a great move by Steve Yzerman in terms of what he did. Maybe the Alex DeBrincat trade, I'll give him that. That was a solid acquisition there. In DeBrincat, and he looks he's fit in really well into that line. But aside from that, there's not a ton there that I love. In terms of Todd McLellan, when he stepped in, the team did look better. So that's a positive there. But again, like we're talking about a coach that was really good. With a San Jose Sharks team in the 2010s, right? It's 2025. I need to see something there. He was in Edmonton for a bit, and they never really got over the hump. So like, it's somebody that was really good and was creating championship teams and kind of developed the Sharks into what they were 15 years ago. So I'm not super high on what he is. I don't hate Todd McLellan as a head coach. I think he's definitely he's a step up over what they've had the last couple of years. Certainly he's the best coach that Steve Yzerman's hired. But I'm not really going to hang my hat on what a coach did, years and years ago, in order to, prop them up now. So, I have them as a tweener team. I think that their ceiling is fairly low. I think their floor is higher than a lot of the teams we've talked about, just because of like the high end talent at the top of the roster. I think John Gibson will make them better, but it concerns me overall, like how much better this team will be. And we look at their numbers last year. They were 30th in goals for, 27th in expected goals for. They had a terrible time, drawing offense. From their offense, from all of their offense, really. Their biggest strength was the power play, but their penalty kill was 32nd, which is what gets them the I think it was 24th rating that I gave them overall. Is just the terrible penalty kill and a power play that I think is bound to regress just with the ages of some of the players and development. I can't see them being top 4 power play again. And defensively they were fine. Pretty middle of the pack, goals against 16th, expected goals against 19th. But 26th in goal share, 25th in expected goal share. That doesn't scream, a team. And you look at the moves they made this year. You add John Gibson, who is past his prime, even if he does bounce back. Where are they going to be better than they have to lift that 26th goal share to something significantly higher in order for this team to be truly considered a playoff team, right? Like they can't be in the bottom third of the league in goal share and expect to be a playoff team. And that's kind of where my problem is, because you look at the teams in their division that they have to leapfrog, right? Like Ottawa looks better. You have Toronto, Florida, and Tampa Bay, who, unless something catastrophic happens, I think everybody has making the playoffs into some capacity, whether it's as a wild card or just as a playoff team. And then you have Ottawa and Montreal, who both made the playoffs last year, and both have young teams that should be developing. And then you have Boston, who knows what the Bruins are going to be, and you have Buffalo, who knows what the Sabres are going to be. And Detroit, in my mind, is kind of at the top of that tier, and that's why they're ranked as they are, rather than in that next tier with even the Montreals, who I think took a bigger leap than they probably should have last year, and I think that Canadiens fans might be a little disappointed in the season, but that's a whole other thing. We'll get to Montreal eventually, and then Ottawa, who looked really solid last year and should be also very solid again this year. And then you have your top three, right? And despite what you think of the regression that the Leafs are going to go through, and then how much, how little the Panthers seem to care about the regular season, you still have those teams, in that top tier. So for me, it needs to be a ton of progression from, a lot of people, probably more than some Red Wings fans think they need to have in order to, be able to push into being a true playoff contender. Now, obviously, you can slip in due to injuries or whatever, but in terms of being a consistent playoff team, those are kind of two different things. We jump to the offense here, and this is kind of where I want to get this conversation started because, like, as I talked about, Larkin, DeBrincat, and Lucas Raymond are all pretty solid players. I don't really have much of an issue with what those guys are producing. It's more everything else, right? And they bring in James Van Riemsdyk, who was fine last year. I don't expect much from him in terms of what he'll bring to this team. I mean, Elmer Soderblom is a solid fourth liner, Michael Rasmussen as well, and it's fine there. They also bring in Mason Appleton, who again, like, I don't know if you watched the Jets last year. And you think Mason Appleton's going to be, an elite third liner for this team, you're going to be disappointed because he's not. They still have JT Compher and Andrew Kopp, who I talked about being, pretty poor contracts and really haven't. They regressed basically the second they stepped on the ice of the Red Wings and haven't been anything of note since then. Patrick Kane, again, awful defensively. His offensive production is starting to dwindle. A lot of that due to age. Obviously, his power play numbers are still elite, but his 5-on-5 production is certainly taken a step down from where it was. Marco Kasper is probably the most interesting player on this team because he actually had a very, very productive season last year despite not having the point totals to back it up. He was elite at, creating opportunities, and it'll just be interesting to see if he can continue to build that because he's somebody that I'm watching here that if he can develop into, a legit second line scoring option for this team, that will help, elevate the 5-on-5 offense quite a bit because having, another option there does certainly help out. And it'll be interesting to see if they do end up splitting up the top line too, just to kind of spread out some of that offense, among the rest of the team. I mean, they could basically play, at least one of those players for half the game. If they're able to do that, and if Marco Kasper can take a step up, then you have two pretty solid offensive driving lines, and that'll certainly help for the playoff push. I think it's important to start with Dylan Larkin because he's kind of the guy who's been here. He's been the good soldier for the Red Wings throughout this whole thing, and we've seen the beginnings of frustration from the Red Wings over what they've been able to do in terms of adding players and trying to make this team into a true playoff team. And if anybody deserves to see the fruits of this rebuild come to, full fruition, it's Dylan Larkin because he's been here through it all and he's still very, very productive first line center. Although I think like he's starting to kind of get on that, that Bo Horvat level of maybe he's better as a 2C if you get yourself an elite 1C or in a tandem with somebody else. And again, maybe Marco Kasper continue to develop and then you don't have that issue. But he's still super productive. Offensively, he's still a very good play driver. He's able to generate, decent amount of opportunities. Now, goal scoring hasn't quite been there. The point totals haven't quite been there in terms of comparing him to other, first line centers. But, defensively, he's still really solid. I think, he's definitely serviceable as a defensive first line center in that role if you need him to play on both ends of the ice. So I'm worried about the regression at some point because he is going to his age 30 season. He's been here for a while. He's been through a lot of really poor teams. I just don't know what his runway is to continue wanting to play for this team. And, maybe we get to a situation if the Red Wings miss the playoffs again and they're not close, they finish about where they did this year, that maybe we start hearing the Dylan Larkin trade rumors again. And those are things that were firing up a couple years ago. Maybe we see them in a more, at a higher level if this year doesn't work out the way they hope. But as for now, as a first line center, he's solid. I think he does the job as well enough, and he should be serviceable for what the Detroit Red Wings need. Lucas Raymond, again, somebody that I wanted to touch on here. Now, he has been progressing the last 3 years. Last year was a bit lesser so than the year before, but I mean, going into his age 23 season, he's locked up for another 7 years at a very fair cap hit. I don't have a ton of concerns about him, in terms of the value that he's going to bring compared to what he's getting paid. It's just more, can he elevate himself and become, a better play driver? Can he continue to be a great finisher? Can he continue to be a good goal scorer for this team? His defense as a winger is very solid. I can't, complain about that. His power play numbers are pretty solid as well. I just need to continue to see him elevating his game more, and the more that he can continue to, take steps up and build himself closer to being, a top, 10 winger in the NHL, the better that's going to be for the Red Wings. Now, do I think he gets there consistently? It's going to be tough. There's going to be a pretty big power vacuum in a couple of years when all the guys at the top right now end up, truly falling off. I think there's a couple, older guys like Kucherov that are up there. So the opportunity when Raymond is like 25, 26 to look like one of the best wingers in the NHL is definitely there. I don't know if it happens like this year, but regardless, I do think that there's opportunity for him to continue to develop, and obviously he hasn't shown any reason to not think that's going to be the case. It's just, again, the top end of this team I'm not really worried about, right? Like, the other guy that we're going to talk about here is Alex DeBrincat, and Alex DeBrincat rocks. He's so good at generating offense in a bunch of different ways, and that's something that really excites me. I mean, obviously his rush offense is definitely the highlight of his game, but his ability to work off the cycle and work off forechecks is really good. His ability to set up, high danger passes, and get into positions where he can, be a recipient for high danger passes is very good. You talk about the playmaking of Dylan Larkin being a really good fit for him, and we saw that almost immediately when DeBrincat stepped onto that top line and became one of the most potent top lines in the NHL for a bit. You really got to see that come into fruition. And I mean, as a shooter, Alex DeBrincat's one of the most underrated shooters in the NHL in terms of what he can do there. And defensively, I think he gets underrated in terms of what he does defensively. Now, I don't think he's like an elite defensive winger, but he's serviceable for what he is. I think he's about as good as you can expect from him. And you should be pretty happy with the production you're getting from him there. I think Alex DeBrincat rocks. I've been a big fan forever. I was a huge fan in Chicago. Obviously, his time in Ottawa was a little strange, but in terms of what he's been with the Wings so far, he's been as advertised. He's been really good. So I definitely think that they should be happy with what they've gotten from him, and I don't expect that to slow down. I mean, he's right in the prime of his career right now, and I think he's one of the best shooters in the NHL. It doesn't get talked about it at all in that category. Now, I don't think that he's on the Matthews Ovechkin level, but I do think that he's in that next tier of shooters for sure. Marco Kasper is the last guy I wanted to touch on here because Marco Kasper is a fascinating player to me. Now he was he played like a third liner last year in terms of role. He has 2 years left at his rookie deal, basically. 21 years old. His play driving last year was phenomenal. His ability to create offense was incredible. The problem is that he wasn't playing with anybody who could finish at a consistent level, and it caused his point totals to not be as high as they probably should have been. His finishing is pretty league average, so he's not going to be a great goal scorer. I really think if the Red Wings want to split up the top line, playing Alex DeBrincat with Marco Kasper on the second line would be electric because of what we just talked about, right? Because of saying that he was a you get kind of the playmaking and the play driving of Kasper paired with the shooting of DeBrincat. I think you could be in for a really potent combination there between the two of them. Now, again, you look at Marco Kasper's primary assists, very low because of the fact that he didn't have that elite finisher beside him, and I definitely think that that's that would be something to look into here. I think his power play numbers could also get better, but I'm very intrigued to see what Marco Kasper is, because I'm very interested to see if this was just a situation where the role that he was played in was extremely favorable, and both his offensive and defensive numbers got inflated because of it, or if he really is this super high quality player that the Red Wings just kind of landed with in the draft. Because I'm leaning towards that. I really liked what I saw from him, and even like in the film study, he was like you could see the flashes of these numbers making sense. It's just going to be a matter of trying to piece that together and make it consistent, and continue to build them, because obviously at the 20 years old, there's a lot of potential swings that could happen due to that. So I'm interested to see a bigger role for him, and consistency, state like kind of matching with the numbers that he put up in his rookie year. But he was fantastic last year, and I'm very interested to see him in a bigger role, because I think he could have a huge impact on what the Red Wings do, and potentially on pushing them into the playoffs. Patrick Kane, on the other hand, is a tough subject, right? Because like, I know the stat nerd community gets a lot of hate because of what they think of Patrick Kane, but at this point, I mean, like, we're talking about a guy who's 37 years old, who wasn't a good defender at the best of times. It's easy to see that 5-on-5 offensively, he's not able to keep up as well as he was in the past. He's still like serviceable, but it's not great. And defensively, I mean, he's awful, and that's nothing new. For the Patrick Kane argument. Now, power play wise, he's still super effective. He's one of the best power play specialists in the league, but that's what he is now, right? He's a power play specialist. And the fact that he's still going to get significant, top 6 minutes here because of the lack of, offensive juice on the third and fourth line, it's really hard for me to see him as anything less than a liability overall. Right now, I get it. He's good in the room. He has the leadership stuff, but you can find that with other players who can also be contributors based on what you need them to be, right? Though, if you're playing Patrick Kane, very sparingly off, like on 5-on-5, and really, sheltering him, and then throwing him out on the first line power play, and he'd put up, a bunch of points, and everybody would be happy, then sure, right? But we're talking about a team that's trying to push for a playoff spot right now, right? This isn't play around time and burn minutes because it doesn't matter. We're going to finish 28th in the league anyway. This is it, right? Like, this is a massive season for this team. Do I think Patrick Kane's going to help in terms of, being a voice in the room during the playoff run? Yeah, probably. Do I think he's going to be a key contributor on the ice to getting them into the playoffs? 5-on-5, absolutely not. Like, straight up, right? And his power play numbers are elite. He's great there, but this just isn't a player who can be a driver for a line 5-on-5 anymore. And he's not somebody who's going to make up for that defensively, right? Like, he's awful. He's a liability 5-on-5, and it's a shame, because he's going to be a liability for if you play him with a young player who's trying to develop, because he's just not going to get the same. You're not going to get the Patrick Kane that existed even a couple of years ago out of him. And I wish that the Red Wings would have had, another guy that they could lift up into that top 6. I don't think, throwing Andrew Copp or JT Compher up there is going to solve a lot of the problems in terms of what they can be. Now, I think overall, like, as far as defensive liabilities go, it definitely helps clog up that gaping hole. But Patrick Kane's such a hard player to place in this lineup, because you don't want to stunt the growth of guys like Marco Kasper, and you want Marco Kasper to get opportunities playing defense too. You just can't do that with him playing with Patrick Kane, because you're basically handcuffing him in the same way. I mean, Detroit's done that before, right? They played fucking Ben Sherratt with Mort Seider for like 2 years, and they might do it again. Like, who knows? So they're no strangers to handcuffing their young players. Like, that seems to be something that they're totally fine with, and I don't get it. I don't know why you would want to do that, but hey, I mean, this is kind of the reality that we're living in, I guess, in Detroit. So now I'm not saying that Patrick Kane has been Sherratt, but in terms of not putting your young players in the best situation, it's tough. It's tough for me to be on board with that. Now, do I think that Patrick Kane, again, like on the bench, could be a great mentor for somebody like Marco Kasper? Yeah, probably. I mean, if you want Marco Kasper to play great defense, maybe not. But in terms of what he can contribute on ice, like there's definitely better options out there. There definitely was better options out there. There still is. There's some good cheap, guys you could probably get on the open market right now that would be very helpful for this team. In terms of adding a secondary scoring winger. But as of now, they haven't really touched that yet. So it seems like they're kind of just okay with what they have, and that concerns me a little bit. We keep going on here. JT Compher, this is your higher end defensive player. Now his quality competition isn't great, but for another 3 years at $5.1 million, you better hope that he can keep playing good defense, because his offense certainly isn't there. His finishing is pretty league average. His play driving isn't very good. His goal scoring isn't very good. He does generate a decent number of assists, but a lot of that seems to be because of the players that he's playing with, and rather than him being the one to generate the offense himself. Defensively, JT Compher is pretty good at shutting down rushes, and his ability to clog up lanes is good. But again, you're looking at somebody here who isn't contributing. Like, this is one of their better defensive forwards, and he isn't contributing on the penalty kill. So you talk about the special teams balance there, and just having good penalty killers isn't really something that the Red Wings have invested in very well, and we saw the results of that last year. And I don't think that that's primed to change. In terms of what they have now. I think John Gibson is going to help the percentages out in terms of what he can do, to help mitigate the leakage in terms of goals against. But in terms of chances against, I don't see a big difference there. JT Compher's fine as a third liner. He's overpaid. It wasn't a great contract at the time. He's going to his age 30 season, 3 years left. He's a low event defensive first player at this point. And that's a lot of money to be paying those types of players. If he's your 3C, it's fine, I guess. He's solid for that role. But in terms of the value that he brings to the team, it's not great. Andrew Kopp is kind of in the same boat. He doesn't do a lot of things on the offensive side of the puck very well. He doesn't generate a ton of shots, doesn't generate a ton of goals, doesn't generate a ton of opportunities offensively. His passing isn't great. In terms of offense, he can get to rebounds pretty good, but his cycle offense isn't great. His rush offense isn't very good. His zone entries aren't very good. His controlled zone entries are, leading to chances are one of the worst in the league. But defensively, he's going to get the puck out of the zone. He's going to win those battles. He's going to be gritty, third line forward. But he checks all the buzzword boxes that the Boomer fans love. But he really doesn't do anything substantial to help the team win games, right? And it's as we've kind of went through this, right? Aside from the first four guys that we talked about, the rest of it is just they're fine for what they're going to be asked to do. But you look at the best teams in the league, and I keep harping on this, but it's that's what Detroit wants to be, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but if Red Wings fans are fine just being a fringe playoff team for the rest of existence, then hey, go for it. That's what you are. And be happy, right? Sure. But you need players who are going to not just, tread water in their role. You need players that are going to elevate what they are, right? And I think you think back to when the Tampa Bay Lightning acquired Blake Coleman, right? I think this is the perfect example. Now, obviously, this was the Julien BriseBois era Tampa Bay Lightning, but same idea, right? And people discuss how Steve Yzerman built that team, so it's his team really, and it's it was, but did the Tampa Bay Lightning win the Stanley Cup if they don't add Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow at that deadline, because of how much they did not only fit the role they were asked to play, but were able to elevate it and create such a dangerous team, when guys like Kucherov and Stamkos and Point were not on the ice? And I'd be hard-pressed to say that they would have, right? Like I think that they had enough tough battles in that year that it they probably don't they or at least their chance of winning the cup would have been dropped significantly. And Detroit just doesn't have any of those guys, right? They have all these players who are getting paid a ton of money to just be okay in their role. And it it doesn't allow this team to really be able to take that step forward. Now it's a bit riskier, right? Because like it's an unknown asset compared to a known commodity, and people are comfortable with what they know. But in order for this team to truly be, taken seriously as a team that can, take steps forward, they really need to figure out how to be better at, you know, finding players who can not only be good for what they're going to be asked to do, but can can elevate what the team can do. And guys like Andrew Copp and JT Compher just aren't going to do that. Sorry. Another guy that's not going to do that is Mason Appleton, man. If you watch the Jets, and I get it, right? The Jets are a stupid market. Nobody watches they nobody talks about them, right? Like they're 800,000 person city. I'm from Winnipeg, I can say that. But like you, like what does Mason Appleton do that this team desperately needed? Can somebody please what does he do to elevate? Like I would have much rather seen the Detroit Red Wings go after one of these, cheaper, offensive first wingers who could be a little bit more dynamic and maybe add some spark to this team. And instead they go get a low event Mason Appleton, who's not really good at anything, could barely find his way onto the Jets team. It hasn't really shown anything substantial for a couple years since his last stint in Winnipeg, really. And I don't know. I don't know what. Now again, it's not a contract that's going to handicap them, right? Like it's a cheap, minimum contract, but what does that do to help the team, right? Like you shouldn't be looking at these players and be like, well, it's fine. Like he's not going to. It didn't cost us anything. It's like, yeah, but he's going to be playing. Like he's going to be an everyday player on your team. Right, like he played 71 games last year for the President's Trophy winning Winnipeg Jets. Like, do you not think that he's gonna be an everyday player for you? Like, I don't. Like, I'd rather have somebody that can bring more value to my team. But again, I don't understand what the idea is here, right? Because the best teams in the league don't sign these throwaway contracts to be like spot fillers on their third line, right? Like that doesn't happen. Right, they sign players like this to be their 14th forward, and unless something happens, that's not going to be what Mason Appleton's going to be. So again, I don't fully understand the vision that's going on in Detroit right now, and it's frustrating because I think that the league's more fun when Detroit is good, right? Like the prime hockey town Zetterberg Datsuk Red Wings was what I grew up on. And it was awesome, right? Like they were one of my favorite teams in the NHL, and it's sad to see that they're just okay with being, a bubble team, and that seems to kind of be the idea here, and it's a little frustrating to watch, and that's why I'm ripping on them a little bit because I want them to be better, and I don't know if that's gonna happen. Right, and it's how much time, and then we're gonna get into a situation where if they don't make the playoffs this year, how much more leash do you give Steve Yzerman? How much more time does he get? And then you have to have the ugly conversation about is it time to move on from one of the legends in Red Wings history? And it really sucks that that's the reality that we have to live in, where the breakup with Steve Yzerman this time is going to be pretty ugly. Especially based on how exciting it was that he was coming here in the first place, and I was excited about it. I thought it was gonna be great, and this is kind of where we're at right now. You look at this blue line, man, and I hate to say it, it's not much better, right? Mort Seider rocks. He's pretty cool. I like him. He's a great, he's a solid number one defenseman right now, and that's kind of what they need. Simon Edvinsson again continues to grow and develop, and I think that he's going to be a pretty solid defenseman. I don't know what his ceiling is going to be in terms of I don't know if he becomes a true number two defenseman, but as of now he's definitely been able to follow expectations and continue to develop as a strong defenseman. And you kind of look at everything else though. Then it's like Ben Sherratt and Justin Hall are they're guys who don't do much to elevate this team and are both likely to be playing in the top four. Find me, a playoff team that has two anchor guys playing 20 plus minutes a night on the blue line. I can show you a couple teams that have one. I can show you a couple teams that have two, and one of them's buried in their third line. But it's tough. Erik Gustafsson, I'm excited about actually because of just how good he's been every other year except for last year. I think that Todd McClellan hopefully can get a little bit more out of him. We're talking about a coach that's worked with some pretty good offensive defensemen, so I'm excited to see if he can maybe get something out of Erik Gustafsson, more so than the Wings did last year. But I'm excited about him. I think there's some upside there. And Jacob Bernard-Docker was a pickup that they made. Again, I'm not super high on what Jacob Bernard-Docker can be. A lot of people love him because he was a high draft pick who had a ton of potential, and it just hasn't really panned out. Most of those players don't end up panning out at the end, so I'm not, waving my head about that as of yet. Yeah, so let's begin here with Moritz Seider, who took a massive step forward last year after really having a bit of a down year in 23-24. He stepped up and really looked like a true number one defenseman last year, really for the first time in his career, in my opinion. And he did that, and he's, $8.6 million for another 6 years is a fantastic contract. Going into his 24th season, that's going to take him, right through most of his prime. Again, the special teams aren't great, and that's tough for your number one defenseman. But that's just sometimes just the reality of it. His competition level has been insane. He might be the player in the NHL, the young player in the NHL right now, who's had the most disadvantaged situation as a defenseman, right? I think that he's been placed in maybe the worst situation out of any of the players that are 24 and under in the NHL in terms of the start of their development. Just because of how much he's been asked to do and how little he's been given around him. I really I believe there's an argument for it. He might not be the lock for that because I'm sure there's other players people might make the argument even for Connor Bedard, but in terms of the start of his career till now, the amount of time that he's had to develop into who he is, it's been tough, man. It's been tough. Now defensively, he rocks, and now again, I think that some of the, at least the analytical look at what Moritz Seider is defensively is him benefiting from Ben Sherratt being as bad as he is. Because the way, if you're not familiar with how defensive metrics are graded, at least in terms of the catch-all stats for defensemen and forwards defensively, is you basically get weighed against what happens when you're on the ice compared to everybody else that's on the ice, and then how all those players fare when you're not with them, basically. That's the short answer of it. It's a lot more technical than that. And because Moritz Seider plays a lot of his time with Ben Sherratt, and Ben Sherratt sucks, it does help elevate his defensive metrics in that sense. So it's hard to know how much of Moritz Seider's defensive ability is purely him, but I think it's a good chunk of it. I think he's a solid defenseman for sure in terms of his defensive ability. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but just in case you see crazy defensive numbers for Moritz Seider, that is definitely a reason for why his numbers are so good. It's not the only reason, it's not the primary reason, but it's definitely a contributing factor to that. Offensively, he's been fine. I'd like to see a bit more creation ability from Seider, and again, some of that has to do with who he's been playing with. It's kind of hard to generate offense when the guy you're looking to pass the puck to is Ben Sherratt, but still, I would like to see a bit more of that from him. But in terms of his overall value, people who rip on Moritz Seider as somebody who isn't a top pair defenseman seems a little strange to me. Red Wings fans calling him a top 10 defenseman also seems a little strange to me, but I think he's good. And we'll kind of I'll meet you both in the middle in terms of that. I think he's a good first pair defenseman. And yeah, I think he'll continue to develop. Do I think he can become a top 10 defenseman? Yeah, I do. He's going to his age 24 season. That's kind of like getting his prime pretty close there. So yeah, I think he can grow into that. I don't think he's quite there yet. Simon Edvinsson is another guy who's interesting. Defensively, very solid. His ability to stop entries into the defensive zone is huge. He's one of the best defensemen in the league at it. His retrievals aren't great, but his ability to enter the zone is also really good. So his entries and his denials are solid. I'd like to see him take another step forward offensively, in terms of both being able to generate high quality passes and his ability to score. Although obviously as a defenseman it's less valuable than it is as a forward. But I'd like to see a bit more regression back to being league average in those things. And I think that will add to his overall value. But if he can continue to be one of the best denial defensemen in the league, that'll help this team a ton. Right? If he can continue to be at, even if he just stays at the level that he is now, in that sense, like he's already one of the best in the league at it. So I definitely think that will be a helpful benefit to what the Wings are doing. But again, it's just development, right? It's putting him in the right situation. Now I don't think he has the strength of a Mort Seider to play alongside of a Ben Sherratt and develop. So I definitely think that Edvinsson's going to need a bit more coddling. And I'll be intrigued. Now I think Justin Holl is better than Ben Sherratt, so in that sense, like you're getting the lesser of two evils. But I'd like to see him play with like a Erik Gustafsson and just kind of let them both loose a little bit and see what happens. Especially with Edvinsson's denial ability, like I think that he can make up for a lot of Gustafsson's potential defensive lapses in that sense. So that's kind of where I'm at here. I need to see another year from Edvinsson before I can make a true full evaluation on what he is as a player. Like I want to see how this year goes in terms of development, especially for a team that's going to be kind of pushing for a wild card spot. I want to see how they utilize him and what kind of value they can extract from him in that sense. But yeah, I mean, overall, I like him as a player. I don't know what the cap is on him yet. I think this year will tell a lot about, in that sense. But overall, he's a solid defenseman. He's definitely the second best defenseman on this team. Erik Gustafsson had a terrible year last year in terms of his offensive production, and that sucked because he was somebody I was very excited about. The short form on Erik Gustafsson is I think he was just completely misused in a system that didn't love him to begin with last year. So I don't know if this was necessarily the best fit for him overall, but again, new coach. I'm excited to see if they can get something out of him. He's already 34 years old. That's insane. But again, Todd McLellan's worked with offensive defensemen before and made it work, right? I think the most notable one in his time in San Jose was Brent Burns. I'm not, again, Erik Gustafsson isn't Brent Burns, but we've seen him, extract value out of those kinds of players, and I think that giving Erik Gustafsson more of an opportunity to be hell, I'd run him as my number one power play quarterback just based on the numbers that he's shown both in New York and even last year in Detroit on the power play. I think that would be a better option than Seider, at least to start the season. And defensively, he was actually he's underrated in what he can do defensively, but it's mainly his offense that's going to bring value. And if he can get back even to 70% of what he was in New York, and before that, then Detroit's gonna have a pretty fun defenseman on their hands here, and somebody that I think could definitely be an X factor in terms of elevating what this blue line can be. It's just about him being able to get back to that. That's kind of the biggest thing for me. Justin Holl, man, I mean, he's putting up middling numbers against really bad competition. He doesn't score. His power play, his penalty kill numbers are mediocre. His defensive numbers are mediocre. His offensive numbers are mediocre. I don't know what he's probably a sixth defenseman at best in the NHL right now. He's getting paid $3 million, $3.5 million this season. Now it is just for this season, but it's like, like there are so many better ways you could have spent $3.5 million than Justin Hall. So it's just kind of funny to me. And again, like it's just like I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but it's like, how does Justin Hall elevate this team, right? I get he's a body, right? He can fill a spot. It's like, okay, that's not what you should be striving for, right? Like teams like San Jose are signing people to fill bodies, right? Like that shouldn't be where you're at. Even when you were signing like that, it's just I don't get it. It frustrates me so much that players like this are getting paid by teams that are trying to push for a playoff spot. It's a pretty tone deaf move. Justin Hall's like, if he's their sixth defenseman this year, it's fine. He won't be, because he won't be worse than Ben Sherratt. So, if both those players play every day, Justin Hall's at worst the fifth best defenseman on this team. And that's just not good enough for a team that's, trying to be serious. Sorry. And then there's Ben Sherratt. I've talked about him enough. Ben Sherratt doesn't do much good in the NHL. He's good at creating rebounds, so that's cool, I guess. He's good at, shooting pucks that are deflected by other wingers. That's cool. He's not very good at denying rushes. His defensive zone puck battles aren't great, especially for somebody as physically strong as he is. His rush offense is, above average slightly, so that's cool. But it's like, again, I don't get it. I don't understand. Like, why do they constantly decide that you need to play? Like, I get it. Okay, I get it. Dustin Byfuglien was able to carry Ben Sherratt, so it was fine, right? Dustin Byfuglien is if he finished out his career, he might be in consideration for like a Hall of Fame spot. Dustin Byfuglien rocked. He was an anomaly. And he was already developed as a, top, defenseman in the NHL at that point. Shea Weber was able to make Ben Sherratt work. Shea Weber's a Hall of Famer who was already fully developed, and was one of the best defensemen in the NHL. Mort Seider is neither of those things. Mort Seider is not a top 10 defenseman in the NHL right now. Mort Seider is still developing. Mort Seider is in a very important part of his career. Mort Seider is not the defenseman to be playing with Ben Sherratt. I don't know what more the Red Wings had to see to know that Ben Sherratt was a bad idea before they signed him. I don't know what more they've had to see over the last number of years to tell them that playing Mort Seider with Ben Sherratt is a bad idea. But here we are in the big 2025. And as of now, the projected pairing is Ben Sherratt with Mort Seider. Detroit wants me to take them seriously so bad. And I want to take the Red Wings seriously. I like Detroit. They're one of my favorite teams growing up. As an 8-year-old kid, I loved watching, Lindstrom, Zetterberg, and Datsuk. Like, I am part of the Nick Lindstrom is the best defenseman of all time camp. I am right there. They make it hard for me to want them to be good and to think that they're going to be good, because they do things like this. And some of the things that I've talked about today might seem minimal and not that big of a deal. But none of the top teams in the NHL are making these mistakes. Florida made the mistake of trading for Ben Sherratt. Look what it got them. Then they moved on and built a better defense and won back-to-back Stanley Cups. I don't get it. I don't understand what it is about just the way this team has been built and why they think it's like it works. Now, granted, they're going to have an opportunity to kind of reset the deck over the next 2 years. And maybe that's what they're waiting for. Maybe they're going to give Yzerman the chance to fix his mistakes. And I really hope he does. But based on what he's done in his time so far in Detroit, I have my doubts. I do. Um, Jacob Bernard-Docker was a waiver pickup that they made, or a free agent pickup they made. Um, the Sabres got him in the Cousins trade with Ottawa. He's a depth defenseman. He's going into his age 25 season. He's solid defensively. Doesn't bring a lot of offense. Doesn't play on. He hasn't really played special teams. Plays against poor competition. Jacob Bernard-Docker is not going to, like, the likelihood, now I'm not going to say not, because it's possible that somehow they find the magic beans that turn Jacob Bernard-Docker into the top 4 defenseman we all thought he was going to be when he was drafted. We're talking about a defenseman who's 25 years old, who's never been even close to being that. He's on his 3rd team now. The Buffalo Sabres gave up on him. Right? Like, that's where we're at. I have my doubts about him being any more than a bottom pair defenseman. Can he end this year being better than Ben Sherratt and Justin Holl? Even that might be a stretch, but maybe. Right. His quality of competition over his career says probably not, but maybe. Cool. Like, that's cool. The benchmark to be your 4th best defenseman is to be better than Justin Holl. That's where we're at with this team. I just want that to sink in, right? Like, in order to be the 4th, maybe 3rd best, if Erik Gustafsson can't figure it out, in order to be a maybe 3rd or 4th best defenseman on the Red Wings, you need to be better than Ben Sherratt and Justin Holl. And this is a team that wants to make the playoffs and be serious. Okay. Jacob Bernard-Docker's fine. It's a low risk move. I get it. They didn't invest anything into him. But, like, Jacob Bernard-Docker being brought in as your 7th defenseman on a blue line that's already pretty established, and then finding out, surprisingly, that he develops a little bit is cool. Bringing him into this mess and hoping that he can become a top 4 defenseman and kind of needing him to become a top 4 defenseman is very different. And maybe, the fire, throwing him to the fire might work. But I doubt it. But bluntly, like, I don't know if I see it. The goalies are fun. I do like the goalies on this team. Now, again, John Gibson has been pretty inconsistent, but Cam Talbot's been good. I've liked what I've seen from Cam Talbot the last couple of years. I think he's a solid, like, 1B. I think this is the appropriate place to have him in this lineup as a 1B. John Gibson can be your 1A. And if they run this similar to how they ran, like, Dostal and Gibson last year in Anaheim, then I'm kind of all for it. Like, I kind of think this is going to work really well, actually. So we're ending on a positive note here for Wings fans. But, I mean, this is kind of what I mean about Gibson, right? Like, you talk about his numbers in 23-24. He had a 102 goals saved above expected. Not great. And then John Gibson last year was at 11, right? Which is cool. But, like, Cam Talbot, 54 and 47 games. Played, obviously Gibson did that on significantly less games, right? He played 30 games last year, 29 games last year, and looked a lot better. So it seemed like the workload getting diminished was actually good for him, which is not a good sign for Detroit Red Wings fans, because the idea behind bringing John Gibson is that he's probably going to be the starter, right? Like, that's the goal. Whereas, like, I honestly, like, I would run Cam Talbot as my starter and then have John Gibson playing backup minutes, and if he can prove that he deserves it, because Cam Talbot has proven that he could be a starting goalie. He played 54 games in LA in 23-24, had a 15.01 goal saved above expected. Very solid. Then last year in Detroit, 47 games played, still starter minutes. He had 10.39. Also very solid, right? Like, the last time John Gibson played over, 40 games, he had 102. So I don't know what the strategy is for how they're going to roll these goalies out. I'm assuming that John Gibson's going to be given the starting role, and I'm really worried that if he gets close to that 45, 46 games again, we might see him hit the wall again that we saw him hit in Anaheim a bunch of times. Right? Like, if I was running this team, like, Cam Talbot would be my starter. The plan would be for Gibson to play 35 games this year. And if Gibson steps in and plays really well in those 35 games and Cam Talbot's struggling, then yeah, Gibson gets the starting job. But I think that he's in a position right now where I need to see him earn it. And as a backup last year, he looked really good. But it was as a backup, right? Lucas Tostel took the big step forward, and he was the starter. And that made John Gibson's job a lot easier, and John Gibson's numbers went up. Cam Talbot in LA was the starter, looked really good. In Detroit was the starter, looked pretty good. That would be the guy I'd go with first. They're not going to do that. I highly doubt they're going to do that. I'm not saying that John Gibson's going to fall apart, but my worry is that we're going to get to John Gibson playing 45, 46 games. His numbers are going to be pretty pedestrian, and they're going to, be hovering around that playoff spot, and they're going to keep riding him out, and they're going to potentially lose out on opportunities because of that. That's my concern, and that's what the data says that they should go with Cam Talbot, and John Gibson has to earn it, and maybe he can, right? Maybe a new situation on a quote unquote better team gets him there, right? Maybe it's just a motivation thing, and part of it probably was, right? Like as the seasons wore on, I'm sure that it became a little demoralizing playing in front of an awful team trying to carry them game after game. Like I get it, right? Like that's reasonable, but I need to see he needs to earn that trust back for me, right? Like he needs to prove that it was just a mental lapse that was causing this, and it wasn't him physically not being as good of a goalie anymore. And until that time, you have Cam Talbot who's really good. So I think a tandem is the best option here. But I think going into the season, Talbot should be pegged as the starter as of now, and then Gibson can kind of earn those extra 10, 15 games as the season goes on. Finally, touching on the special teams, like I said, I have concerns. Like the first line power play looks really solid. The second line power play does not. And the penalty kill is just kind of a mess. And aside if that first line power play, and that's really what carried them last year too. And that's why, despite the fact that they were fourth in goals for, I have my doubts about the unit as a whole because the second pair does still matter. You can argue with me if you think that it shouldn't, but I think it's disingenuous for me to rank a special teams unit high because of 1/4 of the players that are going to be on it. But I mean, fair enough. If you think they should be higher because the first line power play is actually really good, fine. Sure, I don't care. The rest of the units are poor, to say the least. There's not a lot of hope, especially on the penalty kill. They didn't do anything to address the penalty kill at all. As of now, none of the players aside from John Gibson are projected to be on it according to Puckpedia that they brought in this offseason. So they didn't touch it at all. They had the worst penalty kill in the league last year, and they're just kind of running it back. Again, team that wants to be taken seriously as a playoff team. League worst penalty kill. 0 additions to try to make it better. 0 attempt to make it to improve it. And you look at the players on it, right? Aside from Mort Seider and Simon Evanson, they're all old. There's no progression that you're expecting here from any of them. That's what I mean, right? That's the epitome of what I mean by this team and why I don't really take them seriously. Even if maybe they make the playoffs this year. Maybe they squeak in. Maybe John Gibson turns back the clock and they squeak into the playoffs. Now what? Right? Now are you going to start building a serious team because your proof of concept of being mediocre panned out one year? That's what I mean, right? That's the lack of attention to the penalty kill is what kind of is the epitome of what I'm talking about here. And again, you can find cheap penalty. Joel Armia was available. Right? You could have signed Joel Armia. Would have been a way better signing than Mason Appleton. He was there. He didn't get paid a lot. He got paid less than he was in Montreal last year. It was right there to go pay him the extra $1 million. Give him he signed in LA. You can't even give me the tax bullshit. He signed in the highest tax state in the States, or one of them, right? Like, for less than he was making in Montreal. You can't even use that as an excuse. Pay him $3 million a year. Throw him on your first-line penalty kill. It will significantly improve. And he's a better 5-on-5 player than Mason Appleton is. Like, that's what I mean, right? It's like stuff like that. Like, the option was there, but they didn't take it. And maybe if you weren't paying $10 million to mediocre third-line players, you would have had more flexibility to do so. So that's all I got for the Detroit Red Wings. And I know this video seemed like I was ripping on them, and I was. But I'm doing it because they frustrate me. It's not because I don't like the Red Wings. Like, Detroit was one of my second favorite team growing up. like this isn't coming from a place. Like, I have a poster of like the 2008 Detroit Red Wings. I don't know if you can see it in the video. I don't think you can, but it's like right there. Like, this is a team that I like, and I want them to be good. And I'm not picking on them specifically. Like, I feel like I'm being fairly objective for all these teams. But like, I know Red Wings fans are going to be upset. But like, I'm ragging on the team because they could be so much better. They have these pieces that are fun and exciting, and they're just not fully utilizing what value they can get out of them. And like, you think about it, like, this was the off season to spend all your money, but they did it like 3 years ago. Right? Like, spending an extra $2 million on Nikolai Ehlers compared to JT Compher would have been a significantly better player. But they couldn't do that because they had the money tied up in JT Compher, right? Paying Joel Armia instead of Mason Appleton would have been significantly better, but the money was tied up in Andrew Kopp. So they couldn't do that, right? They're paying Justin Hall the $3.4 million they could have paid for Joel Armia instead. Right, so it's like, yeah, those moves were made at a time where this team maybe wasn't trying to be that good, but the outlook and the forethought of where this team should be, like, even back then when those deals were signed, the idea should have been that this offseason was the one where you're kind of starting to really push for a playoff spot if you're not there already, right? Like, that's just creating a timeline for your team, and it just didn't seem like that was something that Detroit did. And that's what's frustrating. And that's why I'm as hard on them as I am. Because it's frustrating. And I want to see them be good. But I'm sure I'll still get a bunch of comments about how I hate the Red Wings and I'm just a hater, like I did last year. And guess what? For the most part, I was right about that, about this team last year. So take that with what you will. But anyway, thank you for watching. If you got to the end of this video, I appreciate you. 19 more of these to go, so we're almost halfway there. We're inching closer to halfway there. Thank you for watching. I hope you've been enjoying this series. If you have, leave a like. Make sure you subscribe to catch them all and all the content I'm going to be posting after this series throughout the regular season and beyond. Thank you for watching again. If you want to listen to these on Apple and Spotify, they're available there too. Just look up NBI Hockey. And follow me on Instagram for more content that won't be posted here. And follow me on Twitter, too. I post on there sometimes. But, again, thank you so much, and we'll see you for team number 19.